With this chapter, the historical aspects conclude, specifically with the details of the life of Daniel, who now is also portrayed as an important player in the conquering empire of the Medes and the Persians. From the perspectives of the dream of chapter 2, the head of gold, symbolic of King Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon, Babylon had now fallen to the chest and arms of silver, which was the joint forces of the Medes and the Persians. It also concludes the historical aspects and significance of the first Jewish diaspora from Jerusalem, providing both examples of righteous living and how to serve with excellence while residing in foreign hostile territory. Daniel not only survived the Babylonian kingdom, but is once again a key administrator in the early days of the Persian kings.
The Persian transition to power.
It pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps, who should be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 administrators, of whom Daniel was one, that these satraps might give account to them, and that the king might not suffer loss. Then this Daniel was distinguished above the administrators and the satraps, because an extraordinary spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm.
Darius the Mede in history. Some liberal critics use this statement in Daniel in an attempt to prove this account as fictional. Why? Because no historical document other than the Bible describes Darius as taking over Babylon. It certainly would be foolish to ignore the biblical Darius, as it mentions facts concerning him. Like, he was 62 years of age, he was a Mede, and is later described as Xerxes, Hebrew Ahasuerus, confirming his Median descent. Those certainly as a collective are factual. As we saw in the case of Belshazzar with the fall of Babylon, the critics went wild, all claiming Nabonidus was the king, only to be shown up with the discovery of the Babylonian Chronicles years later that Belshazzar was in fact a co-regent king. Most Bible-believing scholars are quick to point out that as Persia eventually assimilated the Medes, all their documents would attribute a Persian king and certainly would not mention an interim Median king. It was common practice in these ancient kingdoms that people's names were removed from history in favor of the dominant kingdom. We note a sharp contrast in the matters of government with the Medo-Persian Empire. Firstly, Darius appointed 120 satraps, which were effectively provincial governors, to rule over the whole kingdom. He then assigned 3 administrators or overseers to ensure they functioned as intended. Daniel was appointed as one of these overseers. In these times, kings would often identify people of integrity in existing leadership and place them in positions of control. Makes sense, since they knew how everything worked. But it did not take long for Darius to place Daniel in seniority over the 2 administrators, as the king noticed an extraordinary spirit in Daniel that made him stand out. Effectively, Daniel was second in charge, or as we would like to say it, effectively the prime minister. Now, concerning the appointment of 120 satraps, there are scholars such as Montgomery who claim that this was an exaggeration. But this is treated by most scholars with a pinch of salt, as Esther records 127 provinces under the control of Xerxes, less than 53 years after Babylon's fall. If we compare the prophecy of chapter 2 concerning the Medo-Persian Empire, we see a strong correlation to King Nebuchadnezzar's image. The decline in the element from the head of gold as Babylon to the arms and chests of silver as the kingdom of the Medes and Persians amplifies this inferiority. Although the Persian Empire was larger in size, the king's rule was limited to administrators and satraps. There were also a lot of bureaucratic hurdles, and the king's word was, unlike Nebuchadnezzar, not law. The Persian plot against Daniel.
Then the administrators and the satraps sought to find a charge against Daniel regarding the kingdom, but they could find no charge or fault because he was faithful. Neither was there any error or fault found in him. Then these men said, "We will not find any charge against this Daniel, except we find it against him concerning the law of his God.
It is evident that these rulers were not impressed with the king's decision to be overseen. While their reason is not directly given concerning their plot to remove Daniel, it certainly involved jealousy and their own lack of integrity. They were up to no good, and Daniel was an obstacle for them. You will also notice that Daniel's integrity is beyond reproach, as this is now the third time he's been elevated by a pagan king. Through carefully watching Daniel at work, they quickly realized there were no apparent flaws in his reign, but they did observe he had religious strengths. It is highly likely that some of these satraps could have held positions in Babylon and had witnessed his rebuke of Belshazzar, which would have given them insights to Daniel's regard for the laws of God. Now we see a familiar trend. Finding no fault, they would use Daniel's belief against him. They designed a plot not to just get Daniel into trouble or him losing his position, but one with high stakes, a crafty scheme to get Daniel executed. It was an exceptionally cunning and ambitious plot, and would no doubt have had multiple consultations from various satraps and scouts. So let's listen to how they went about the scheme. The crafting of a decree.
Then these administrators and satraps assembled together to the king and said to him, King Darius, live forever. All the administrators of the kingdom, the deputies and their satraps, the counselors and the governors, have consulted together to establish a royal statute and to make a strong decree that whoever shall ask a petition of any god or man for 30 days, except of you, O king, he shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the decree and sign the writing, that it not be changed, according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be changed. Therefore King Darius signed the writing and the decree.
So we learn just how they used flattery to gain King Darius' attention. While unusual, the request to make a petition to any god or man other than King Darius for a limited period of 30 days would have been appealing to the king. Remember, Darius was a newly appointed king, and such a proclamation would not only acknowledge the authority of Persia over the newly acquired territory, but would also significantly contribute to the unification of the Persian Empire. To add injury to insult, they blatantly lied to the king about the unification of the rulers in stating that all the administrators, satraps, and even the lower levels of government were in agreement with this proposal. While the punishment was extreme, it appears that the king saw this possibility so remote that he had no hesitation to sign it, proclaiming it into law. After all, was not everyone in agreement, and the greater empire would benefit from it? Daniel cast the decree aside.
When Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went into his house. Now his windows were open in his upper room, facing towards Jerusalem, and he kneeled on his knees 3 times a day, and prayed, and gave thanks before his God, as he did before. Then these men assembled together and found Daniel making petition, and petition before his God.
It is certainly a matter of fact that Daniel was well aware of the signed proclamation. As the scriptures confirm, he knew that the writing was signed. But this was not going to change his principles. He followed his normal routine and would 3 times a day go to his upper room, kneel before God, prayed, and gave thanks to God. He did not change a thing. He even left his windows open. Now, the custom of praying towards Jerusalem was actually initiated by King Solomon. It continued until the time of Christ's ascension. In similar fashion, the custom of praying 3 times a day appears to be initiated by David, who, according to the Psalms, prayed in the evening, morning, and at noon. While it is not known when kneeling before God in prayer originated, it caught traction as kneeling is a form of submission. It allows your thoughts to humbly approach God in prayer and removes egotistical thoughts in the process. Let's read for ourselves how crafty these men really were. With spying eyes, his accusers who witnessed Daniel in prayer appear to send a delegation to the king to spring their plot into action. They shrewdly approached the king on the premise of inquiring whether the decree was signed, knowing full well it was already signed into law. As soon as they received this affirmation from the king, they immediately accused Daniel of having no regard for the king or his laws. Interestingly, there is a bit of anti-Semitism evident here, since they stress that Daniel came from the children who were taken captive from Judah. It is still prevalent today, and unfortunately will escalate the closer we get to the end of the age. I mentioned before the role of jealousy and the lack of integrity in the plot, but this anti-Semitism is also a major contributor to the scheme. They simply had the same old satanic hatred for the Jews. A distressed King Darius.
Then the king, when he heard these words, was very displeased, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored until the going down of the sun to rescue him. Then these men assembled together to the king, and said to the king, Know, O king, that it is a law of the Medes and Persians, that no decree nor statute, which the king establishes, may be changed.
The king's reaction would not be what they expected. They were subdued enough to leave his presence, initially obviously to plot their next course of action. The fact that the king set in his heart to deliver Daniel and labored until the evening to rescue him shows that the king was deeply displeased and upset. By this stage, it is almost certain that he knew that this was a contrived plot. Having regrouped, the delegation continued to apply pressure on King Darius by reminding him that according to Persian law, no decree made could be changed, not even by the king himself. Daniel cast into the lion's den.
Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel, and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spoke and said to Daniel, Your God, whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. A stone was brought and placed on the opening of the den, and the king sealed it with his own signet, and with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel.
Being caught in a vice, the king had no option and had to execute the judgment upon Daniel. The mere fact that he took Daniel aside and told him that your God whom you continually serve will deliver you shows us he was trying to encourage Daniel. Although he was being prophetic, it is doubtful that he actually believed in his own words, as he later shows extreme signs of anguish and mental torment. Daniel was likely lowered down into the den through the hole at the top with ropes. The fact that the hole to the den was sealed with a stone, then followed by a seal with 2 signet rings, confirms that this was an unbreakable act. We are able to discern the construction of dens of lions during this period from the descriptions given in the text. It had an opening from the top in which food would be lowered into a cavern. The doors of each section could be lowered or raised, and the top would be concealed by a huge stone. While the stone on top would normally be left open, in the event of people being cast into the lion's den, it would be sealed to prevent escape. A similar type of enclosure has been discovered in Morocco. A night of pain.
Then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep fled from him. The king arose very early in the morning and went in haste to the den of lions.
Interestingly, Darius acted like a prophet in many aspects. He left the scene, fasted, avoided all pleasure, and even battled to sleep. When it was time to see the outcome, he arose very early and moved in haste and cried out with a lamentable voice. All these actions confirm he did not necessarily believe what he had said. But there was always hope, and he was hanging on to it. It is also possible he had reason for the hope, in that he had heard the stories of God moving in Daniel's or his friends' lives. The mere fact that he still ventured close to the lion's den illustrates some possibility in his mind that Daniel would be rescued. So how was Daniel rescued? Let's chat about it on the other side. His cry at the entrance, "Is your God, whom you serve continually, able to deliver you?" is one of desperation. Yet he still had a remnant of faith in uttering these words. It is evident that this Gentile king did have faith. There was also a general belief that when it was difficult to determine guilt or innocence, the defender would be placed in a situation where death was inevitable. And if they survived it, it would be seen as divine intervention in the matter, and the person would be declared innocent. To both his surprise and relief, Daniel responded in a courteous manner towards the king. So much for the first accusation by the accusers, that he had no regard for the king. As Daniel said, "O king, live forever." God had intervened directly by sending an angel to seal the lions' mouths. Daniel was declared innocent because God saw his innocence and he had committed no wrong to the king. There was not even a sign of damage on his clothes or on his body. If God intervenes, you are set free. Summoning the plotters.
The king commanded, and they brought those men who had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives. And the lions overpowered them, and broke all their bones in pieces, before they came to the bottom of the den.
Since only those men who accused Daniel were summoned with their entire families, it strongly suggests that this was a select group who did the plotting. It is a strange judgment for us in that their families were also executed. However, in these times, it was believed that as the family benefited from criminal activity, they were likely to copy them. Elimination was seen to prevent treachery, reprisals, and even possibly murder from reoccurring, ending the cycle once and for all. This would also serve as a warning to other rulers who were not part of this core group of accusers. Now, there are actually some people who suggest that the lions were fed and not really hungry, and that is why they left Daniel alone. While Daniel does use a hyperbole, it is clear that his accusers and their families were ripped to pieces before they could even move freely. So much for those that believe the lions were fed or tamed. A final decree.
Then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages who dwell in all the earth, "Peace be multiplied to you. I make a decree that in all the dominion of my kingdom, men tremble and fear before the God of Daniel, for he is the living God and steadfast forever. His kingdom shall not be destroyed, and his dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues, and he works signs and wonders in heaven and in the earth, who has delivered Daniel from the power of the lions." So this Daniel prospered in the reign of Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian.
As it was with King Nebuchadnezzar in chapters 3 and 4, Darius issued a decree to all people, nations, and languages over his kingdom. The same wording is evident in chapter 4, where similar phrases such as "peace be multiplied to you," "his kingdom shall not be destroyed," and "his dominion shall be forever" were applied. It indicates that it is probably the same person who was involved in the issuing and wording of this decree. Many believe that it was Daniel. So we learn that Daniel continued to prosper, both in the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus. This appears to confirm that Daniel understood that King Cyrus was the prominent ruler of the Medo-Persian Empire. Since the phrase Darius and in the reign of Cyrus the Persian can be translated as Darius, that is, Cyrus the Persian, some scholars suggest that Darius was an alternative name for King Cyrus. This was Daniel's final test and brings the historical account and storyline of Daniel to an end. Liberal scholars and professors do not believe the account of Daniel in the lion's den, since there are similarities to the account of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We know we can rely on the words of Daniel, since Jesus himself referred to him as a prophet. Daniel was not a historian, as the Jews like to portray, but a prophet who happened to reveal some key historical moments while he was taken into captivity. Since he is confirmed by the Lord Most High, we can be assured that his words are true and an accurate account of what transpired. It's what we do with these words that matter. See you in the next episode, where we explore a fascinating prophecy still alive to this day. Until next time, Maranatha.